Hey, welcome to my channel. My name is Rob.balasabas. Really glad to have you here. This is going to be, again, another snippet. Actually, no, it's a full episode from my podcast. If you haven't checked out my podcast yet, you can find it basically on any podcast platform. It's called Coffee with Creators. And this is actually a full episode from a conversation that I had with my friend Avi Gandhi. Avi is he's been around the content creator economy industry for many, many years, even before it was called the creator economy. He recently was working with Patreon before breaking off and doing his own thing as a content creator. He just launched a podcast as well and is doing a lot of consultation and consulting with different brands and startups and founders on how to work with content creators and influencers, partnerships, all those sorts of things. And it was a really good conversation just from, with somebody that is really someone that I can really, really connect with about, all sorts of influencer marketing strategies and content creation, sponsorships, brand deals. We just went real deep into it. It's quite a bit of a long conversation, but feel free to just play it in the background, just like I do when it comes to podcasts. And I hope you really enjoy this conversation. Now, I want to say thank you to some friends of ours. First of all, I want to say thank you to SPREADSHOP for sponsoring this podcast. Also, I want to say thank you to them for sponsoring the YouTube channel as well. And so SPREADSHOP is a fantastic platform to launch your own merch store. All right. So if you want to go check them out, you can see them on the screen here. You can go to the link in the description. Let them know that Rob sent you so that they know that their sponsorship is working to reach content creators out there. They're a fantastic company. DJ Kaufman, make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn or Instagram. He's a fantastic guy. He works within SPREADSHOP and just is such a great advocate for creators out there in the industry. All right. Also, want to invite you to subscribe to my newsletter. This is a newsletter that goes out every week, once a week, maybe sometimes twice a week, but really bite-sized, 60 to 120 second newsletter that you can consume in just like a minute or 2 minutes, real quick, that has lots of creator economy news, content, upcoming events, and also just helpful resources for you as a content creator to grow your content business. And finally, before we get into the conversation with Avi, if you really want to go deep and just really connect with me and the community that I'm building, make sure that you head over to contentcreator.live. Here it is. And Creator TV, we've got a membership. It's a monthly membership. Comes with a Discord server that's private that you can join, where I'm hanging out basically every single day and connecting and doing live sessions, AMA sessions, Ask Me Anything, live workshops, and everything else like that. There's also on-demand content. And so there's a 5-day free trial to join. Check out the community. I invite you to do that. And then also after that, it's going to be $10 per month, which is really, really, just a couple cups of coffee, right? As they say. So, but yes, it's going to be an awesome community. I invite you to join us, join the conversation. Some amazing creators in there. And so I really hope that you join us over there. All right. So with that said, I'm really excited for you to meet my friend Avi Gandhi in this episode of the Coffee with Creator podcast. Here we go. I'll see you on the other side. Hey, Avi, good to have you here on the podcast. How you doing?
I'm good, man. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Honored to have you on the podcast. Like I was telling you, been following you and catching your content on LinkedIn for quite some time. And so, yeah, it's great. Just for the folks that are out there that are listening, that are just kind of new and meeting you for the first time, you just care to take a minute or two and just introduce yourself, kind of a little bit about your background in the creator economy and this industry and, kind of where you're at right now.
Totally. So I've been in the creator economy for, I guess, longer than it's been called the creator economy. Started in Hollywood, in the mailroom of WME, became one of the first talent agents in Hollywood representing YouTube stars, Vine stars back in the day, if that'll date myself a little bit, Instagrammers and podcasters, et cetera, et cetera. And so have been kind of around the block in the creator economy. I've held roles in basically every category you could think of, talent agent, manager, entrepreneur, partnerships executive, influencer marketing, and producer slash creator myself. So most recently ran the creator partnerships team at Patreon, and now I am launching my own consultancy and advisory firm where I work with mostly creator economy companies, but really any kind of business that believes they can benefit from working with creators. To help them, partner with creators in deeper ways, understand, how their product works for creators, what kinds of creators it would work for, how to reach those creators, how to message those creators, and ultimately how to be successful in working with creators.
Awesome, awesome, and congratulations! I guess you're actually like part of the Creator Accelerator this
Yes,
year on LinkedIn. How's that been so far?
it's been great. Today is the last day, so you're catching me right at the tail end here. But it's been awesome. I started posting on LinkedIn. I don't know, I guess I've been on LinkedIn for a long time, but I really started posting seriously on LinkedIn maybe 6 to 8 months ago, and it's been super rewarding. And then the accelerator has been a great way to sort of force myself to build the systems and the discipline to start posting day in and day out. And they also funded what is really a passion project for me, which is my podcast, Creators of Color, where I talk to content creators who are also people of color about maybe the challenges that they've experienced as people of color in the creator economy, and how they've maybe leveraged, the fact that they're people of color to their benefit, and sort of dig in on the economics and the challenges, and where they're going with it all. So that's been exciting. Just launched actually the second episode today as well. So that's wherever you get podcasts. We've interviewed people like Kingsley, who is a OG YouTuber. Today is Stro. He's one of the top directors in the digital space. He produces and directs content for everyone from Lele Pons to Tuan, and a bunch of others. And so we have more in the pipeline, and I'm excited about that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, I personally love that you have a podcast, just for creators of color. I think that's fantastic. I mean, being I'm Filipino, and so there's a huge sort of place in my heart for all right, let's get some of these talent in front of mainstream, if that makes sense. There's so many of them that's just either working behind the scenes or supporting creators. And I've been just trying to sort of be an advocate to get them in front of the camera, and building businesses around it as well, not just this hobby that's fun.
Totally. When so much of the conversation about the creator economy is centered around people, white people, right? You look at the creators that we talk about the most, right? Like people like Mr. Beast and Charlie D'Amelio, and
Yeah,
they're great and amazing creators. And Charlie D'Amelio just won Dancing with the Stars, which is awesome.
it's crazy.
But there isn't as much conversation about a lot of the creators who are people of color, who are also enormous, right? Kabi Lame. I don't know if I might
Yep.
not be pronouncing his name right,
I know,
but
I know.
he's bigger than Charlie D'Amelio at this point, but no one's really talking about him. And so my hope is that through the show we'll be able to draw more attention to the fact that there are these amazing creators out there. They're facing unique challenges, and they're overcoming them in order to do what they love to do.
Yeah.
And hopefully that also gets them in front of more executives and partnerships people, and gets them more opportunities, and creates more conversation for what is really actually probably the largest part of the creator economy. Right? The creator economy is so broad and so diverse.
Yeah.
So I think that's exciting.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot to be said about, things that you're doing, like the podcast, and just being, sort of representation matters, right? I mean, this is a massive conversation, but just seeing, people of color having a podcast and interviewing other large creators and industry experts, it's hey, that's cool. I could probably do that now too, and kind of gives a lot of folks out there that are people of color have permission almost to all right, I can do that as well, and I can get the
Yes.
brand deals
Yeah.
as well, and and man, as a brand, I've been noticing that there's a lot more diversity in brand deals and UGC and stuff like that, because why not? I mean, some of the biggest markets are outside of North America, so why wouldn't you have diversity and people of color in your UGC and all of your marketing efforts?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there are so many communities, even in North America, that
Yeah.
are, I think, underrepresented and ignored largely by marketers. Just having some people of color in a commercial that is still written and directed and largely creatively driven for white or mainstream, which means white audiences,
Hmm.
doesn't actually reach those audiences, right? You need to
Right.
have people of color coming up with those stories and telling those stories and distributing those stories and sort of leading those stories. And, that's slowly starting to happen.
Yeah.
And my hope is that by talking about it, by drawing attention to it, we can catalyze it happening
Absolutely.
faster and faster.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, it's really good to have somebody like you because you've been in the game for like over 15 years. I'm just ballpark
Long, long
guessing.
time, yeah, yeah,
Long
roughly,
time,
yeah.
right? You've been in the game for a long time. So you've kind of seen this, before it was even a creator economy. You've seen deals happen and all that stuff. Just in general, I guess super high level before we kind of zoom in, like how has it changed? How has creator like partnerships and influencer marketing, how has it changed in your point of view from like when you started in the industry like 15, 10 years ago to like now the last couple years after the pandemic, the surge of like consumption of digital content, short form videos, like all of these massive changes, right? That's kind of changed the way we consume content now. um,
And I
how has
think
it
that's a really
changed
good
for
question.
you?
Yeah. So what's interesting is, when I was first kind of becoming an agent and starting to represent these creators, nobody knew who any of them were, but they
Mm,
had bigger audiences than a lot of cable TV shows. And, but, it was a fairly small community. And so there were only a few, right? A few hundred maybe
yeah.
of like the large creators, million scale, and so when you talked about creators, you had a general sense of who you're talking about, right? It was young millennials or older Gen Z, and they were largely on YouTube or on TikTok, and they made skits and other kinds of content. And then over the years, that started to fragment
Mm,
and proliferate, right? And so now, when you say creator, you could mean any number of things, right? A creator could be, Charlie D'Amelio dancing on TikTok and now winning Dancing with the Stars.
yeah.
Creator could be, myself writing articles about the creator economy and monetizing through consulting. Creator could be Hrishikesh Hirway, who's a podcaster who also is a musician. There are so many different kinds. Right? There's cooking creators, and there's fashion and beauty creators, and there's you name it, right? You whatever it is, right? Like I'm just staring, like look at something in your room, and I'm looking at my speakers right now. There's a whole subset of like audiophile creators, and I've got like an anime action figure, and there's a bunch of like creators who make in-depth videos analyzing the latest episode of whatever anime you can think of, right? And so
So true.
it's so many people are creators, and they're creating so many things about so many different things that you might never have even imagined 10 years ago that they would. That like when a lot of executives say we're serving creators, or we're going to win the creator economy, or we're going to win this category of creators, or whatever it is, or this category of like creator monetization or whatever, that's like too broad of a catch-all,
Mm.
right? That's like saying we're going to win people.
Yeah.
There are some companies that have won people, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
at a certain point, Facebook had won people. And today, you could argue that like WhatsApp has won people, and blah, 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 right? Like anyone really can use it. But like within the creator economy, it's not the same. There are very few platforms, aside from the extremely large audience aggregation platforms, that can serve every single creator like that. And so, like, my point of view here is that I think that there's going to be a lot of companies that can be billion scale companies, but are going to serve specific verticals and categories of creators. And so, there may be, I'll use membership as an example because I was at Patreon. Like, there may be a dozen membership companies with $1 billion in revenue over the next 5 or 10 years, and they're serving different kinds, right? Like, Uscreen and Kajabi and Patreon and all these others will have, roughly similar monetization capabilities,
Hmm.
but they'll serve very different creators.
Right, right, right.
And I think there's room for that.
Hmm.
So I think that's what's very different today is like this fragmentation means that if you're building for creators or if you're trying to target creators or work with creators, you've got to get really crisp on what that group of creators are, what they do, who their audience is, how they make money, what their mindset is, all of these things.
Is it kind of like like a few years ago there was like everybody was coming up with like it's an startups, it's like, and they do describe it as like it's the Uber for groceries, it's the Uber for something. Is there enough, like, is it kind of like that? Is it like, are we going to see a world where it's like, hey, this is a merch platform for musicians, this is a merch platform for artists, this is a merch platform for podcasters? Is it like, is there going to be enough creators, enough in the money in the economy, in the creator economy, for that to exist, like a world like that to exist where it's not like one place,
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think everyone is a creator, right? So
Right.
like at a certain level, the question is just, are they monetizing it or not? Right? Because there's
Right, right.
definitely people who have smaller audiences than I do and who make less money than I do, who are like deeply committed to the idea that that they are creators. And I would say they're maybe more creator than I am, right?
Right.
And then likewise, there's people who have huge audiences who have never monetized a day in their life and aren't even trying to do anything about it, and don't consider themselves creators, who are also creators. And there's everyone in between. So, if you just take like one of the many estimates out there, right? 50 million creators in the world right now.
Hmm.
Um, if all of those platforms, or if all of those people averaged in a year, you know, let's say $1,000 in revenue, that's $50 billion in revenue across all of these
Right.
creators,
Right.
right? Which is the point that we'll get to. I think both the number of creators will grow and the amount of money they can make across platforms will grow. And so,
Mm.
even with this $50 billion number, that still supports $51 billion revenue companies.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
And there's probably going to be more than that.
More than
So
that,
I
yeah.
absolutely think that there are opportunities because if you think about it, a merch company that serves beauty creators on YouTube is probably going to have very different products and capabilities and branding
Yeah.
and relationships than a merch company that serves gamers,
Gamers, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And so, like, this absolutely is already a thing and
yeah.
will continue to be.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, good point there. I love that. I love that thought. Um, as a so you consult with a lot of corporate company, like different companies and startups, and I think you mentioned like a lot of Web3. Like, what are some of the hurt? Because I think there's only like we're only still seeing like just a small fraction of those companies out there actually embracing working with
Mm.
creators. Like, um, what are some of the hesitations that you've heard, if any? What are some of the common hurdles that they have, like, with sort of leveraging the opportunity to work with creators to get their products and services out to market?
Yeah, I'd say there's three that
Mm.
I kind of have heard or come across. First off, is just they don't know how. Um, and so, there's already not even a cottage industry at this point, a meaningful industry popping up around that, right? There's lots and lots of influencer marketing agencies.
Yeah.
Um, what I'm doing is hopefully steering it in a different direction, which is more about deeper relationships and partnerships between creators and companies. But,
Mm-hmm.
the idea at the highest level is the same: help companies and creators work together to make money, right?
Yeah.
So largely they don't know how. Another one is they might have been burned, right? The reality is that, especially with a influencer marketing framework, companies that treat creators like media expect those creators to behave like media, and creators are people.
Right.
And not only are they people, they're not like MBA ultra rational, business executives. They're artists or creators, right? I
Right.
mean, some of them are more entrepreneurial than others, but ultimately, like, you have to work with them very differently than you might work with a website that's selling media inventory,
Right.
right? Because
Right.
there's creative involved. There's like this person's relationship with their audience involved. Like, they have to protect that asset. There's a lot of moving parts. And so often companies will partner with creators. So many companies partner with creators on a very surface level, right? It's not really a partnership, it's just influencer marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the creator negotiates to get as much money to do as little as possible, or their agents or managers do. And then which is, the buyer is used to, because that's how they work with, you know, uh, other media inventories like websites and those kinds of things. And then it doesn't work because the creator isn't super bought into it, or maybe it's the buyer's fault. Maybe the buyer said, "Oh, this creator has big numbers. I want this creator with 1 million like views per video to market my widget," when that creator's audience doesn't line up with the widget at all, right? You
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
marketing a casual mobile game to an audience of hardcore PC gamers just doesn't work, right? So like
Doesn't work.
there's those kinds of things where it ends up not working for either party, because both parties, kind of goes back to that beginning, they don't know what they're doing. They might think they do, and for the creators, they know that they're just being treated like inventory. There's no relationship with this buyer, and so it doesn't really matter to them if the buyer is successful or not, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and so a lot of times you don't see companies come back to work with creators again, which
Right.
is ironic, because the creators that are making the most are the ones who do have that repeat business. So,
Yeah.
there are some smart managers out there who encourage their clients to do that, but I think that's a big hurdle.
Yeah.
And then I would say the third thing is opportunity cost, right? Like, we live in a world where a lot of companies do and should think about their marketing spend and partnership spends in terms of LTV to CAC. And historically, media inventory was super cheap, right? Like, search ads, social ads, like all of that was incredibly effective and incredibly cheap for basically the last decade, or like decade and a half, until the last like 4 or 5 years. And really now, over the last year, it's really fallen off because of Apple nerfing Facebook's ability to get audience data and do targeting and all of that, right? And
Yeah.
so historically, opportunity cost has been very high. It's like, if I'm going to spend $100,000 in order to acquire customers, should I do it with creators who are, frankly, it's hard to measure ROI. It's not always direct sales. It's great for the brand, but that's also hard to measure. And like, it might just completely fail. Or should I do it on Facebook or Instagram or Google, where like I can see immediate analytics on the ROI? I can pull the spend if it's not working. I can be more nimble, yada, yada, yada. And so I think that's also been a big hurdle for this space.
A big hurdle as well. I mean, at Uscreen, as head of partnerships, I do oversee our sponsorships, and so I am learning that there's like a real big difference for between like demand creation, which is typically what UGC and sponsored content is. You're creating demand, and then demand capture, which is like Google Ads and like all that stuff, where you're like capturing demand that's already been built and they're just searching, and then now you're capturing that data. What are, I guess, a couple questions on that, to like, for the folks that are out there that are maybe either representing a brand, or in a role where you are within a brand and you're like doing these deals with influencers and influencer marketing. Avi, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you even start? Like, how would you start? Like you said, one of the hurdles is how to start. So do you start small? Do you do a test budget, a quarter, maybe for a quarter? And then also the secondary part of that question is like, what are some metrics that you can capture to report and prove that this channel works, and something you should continue to invest in?
Yeah.
For the corporate folks that you're working with, how are these conversations kind of looking like?
Yeah, I think the first thing you got to start with is like, what is your goal? What is the one metric that
Like
defines
awareness or whatever that
right,
is, right? Yeah.
right? Because those are very different. I've had clients say, "Well, let's worry about like the goal once we have the strategy." I'm like, you can't have a strategy. Like
We have a
you
goal.
literally
Yeah.
have to have a target
Mm-hmm.
to aim towards,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you have to figure out, is our goal awareness? Is it to shift our brand and perception of the brand? Is it to make money? Like so many challenges and problems that I've had in the past with companies I've worked with or at or have done partnerships with on behalf of creators, all of that are this sort of shifting mindset around what the goal is. Like
Right.
if you're doing a partnership where your goal is to shift the brand, and then you're evaluating success by LTV to CAC, those are two different things,
Right. Right.
right? And like that metric doesn't measure that goal.
Right.
And so you've got to start with what the goal is, and then you can back the metrics out based on that. And then once you've identified what the goal is, what the metrics that sort of measure that goal is, or what the KPI is, ideally you only have one, but you might be able to have some kind of input metrics to that. Um, right? Like if LTV to CAC is your KPI, because your goal is driving profitable customer acquisition, then the input metrics for LTV to CAC are whatever constitutes LTV and however your team measures that, and then the cost of the campaign, and maybe if you're going to include like overhead costs and all that stuff. Right? So those are your input metrics. And then to test it, you start small. I think to your point, micro influencers actually do very well from a campaign perspective. The tricky thing is they have higher kind of floor costs because like it's basically I like to call it the get out of bed cost. Like no one wants to get out of bed for less than a certain amount of money,
Right.
even if they don't have the biggest audience. And so, you might be spending a little bit more on a CPM, estimated basis for those creators, but they tend to have higher engagement, higher conversions, etc. And so, testing with one or more within like a small subset of your budget of those creators, testing different types of creators within that subset, and identifying which creators and which types of creators and which platforms and channels and what specific content subgenres etc work, and then going in
I love
on the
that.
bigger spend.
I love that. I love that. Is there sort of a what you would advise your clients in terms of like a minimum number of integrations before you're like this was a sufficient test of this creator of this channel? Like, is it maybe one, like two, three, like a certain number of views? Like, all right, nobody is that didn't click, that messaging didn't work.
Mm.
Let's try again. Or do you like how do you decide? Let's try again. Let's keep testing, or like this is not the avenue. Let's
I think
explore others.
a couple of things. I think one is it depends on the kind of company, right? So like with a
Right.
creator economy company, they usually already serve creators. They might already have some data. So it's like, let's look first at what's already worked, test within the framework of what seems to have already worked, and maybe some that appear that they could work,
Right.
and do a couple of those and see how close we can get to some goal that we set, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So like maybe the goal is launching, we want creators who make over $1,000 a month on our monetization platform of whatever it is. And so we've got a few that are making 700 within this category. Okay, let's see if we can find some tangential and around that make 1,000. Let's go after five because we think within our budget we can get five,
Mm-hmm.
and or our willingness to spend on a test we can get five. And if we do get at least one that hits that, then we know it's possible,
Right. Right.
and then we can start to explore how. And I think you can take a very similar approach with uh, like brand and product promotions. Basically thinking through which types of creators would benefit from this product. Are there types of creators that have already covered this product, or tangential products, competitive products, that sort of thing. And I think you let your appetite dictate your testing. And there are companies that I've said like, look, like it's not worth it's not worth working with me. It's not like, and I don't know if it's worth doing this if your appetite is that small, because like you're just not going to get that many creators. Um, yeah, so
Yeah.
it varies.
Yeah, that definitely varies. No, that's good. That's good. I think that's a good framework. I'm just looking at the time, and I realized, man, we are so over time already. Like we could
I'm
probably keep
happy to
on
keep
going.
chatting. You want to keep
Okay,
going? Yeah.
perfect, perfect. Okay, great. Yeah, I've got a couple more questions for you because I think, like, for the folks out there that are working within companies and brands, this is a whole new world, right? It's like, typically you do the typical things that tech companies do is like, buy paid media and AdSense and email marketing and virtual summits, conferences. But like this whole world of like working with creators and influencers, micro influencers, mega influencers, like this is such a, different world. Um, would you, when, if you're a brand and you're working with a creator that is represented by an agency, would you typically suggest that that brand either brings on an advisor to represent you in some of those negotiations if you're not familiar in those waters? Like, how would you approach that if you were a brand working with a creator that is represented by a manager? Like, I kind of look at it like a real estate deal, right? Like, if you're like looking to buy a place and from somebody that has a realtor representing them, you're kind of
Right.
at a disadvantage. So you should go get your own agent as well. So,
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think it does help having someone in your court.
mm,
Um, it probably depends on the experience of the people on your team, right? If you
right,
have absolutely no idea what you're doing, if no one on your team has ever done a creator deal, then like
right,
you should definitely seek out help.
right.
Um, but that's becoming increasingly rare. I think at this point, most marketers have done partnerships with creators of some sort. And to be honest, if you are just getting started and testing things out, you shouldn't be working with people who have managers anyway. Those people are
Right.
big, they're expensive, they're going to take your money, and you're likely to have wasted that money. You should be trying to reach out directly to creators who are smaller, who you might still want to pay, but you can make much smaller deals with them. And you can talk to them directly, get their feedback on the product, get their feedback on what their audience is saying, build relationships with them, maybe even build long term relationships with them.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and then once you know that you've done 5, 10, 20, deals or partnerships or product launches or whatever it is with these smaller creators, and you're like, all right, we know this type of creator generally works. This is the big fish in that pond. They have a manager, etc. Well, at least you know kind of what you've paid over here, and you can kind of scale that up based on their viewership and all of that,
That's great.
and
Yeah.
and then negotiate from there, because it's all going to be a negotiation. You're going to pay a premium for bigger creators.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good advice. That's really good advice. Have you ever seen a scenario with a company that's eventually brought on their own in-house influencer, their own in-house creator to be the face of their brand? Like, is there a point in time where that makes sense? Um, Maybe once you're more rather than like paying for UGC content, like you bring on someone in-house. Have you ever worked with a brand like that or had sort of experience in that situation?
That's interesting. I mean, I personally have not. I would say Patreon's probably the closest, right? But
Right.
Jack is the founder,
Yeah.
and he is the face, and he is the creator, and the creator's creator,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and
It's true.
certainly like that is a big part of the company's brand, and
Yeah,
it's
that's true.
worked very well for them. And yeah, so
That's true. That's true. That's true. That's actually a really good example. On I guess on the LinkedIn side, I'm seeing a lot of founders. Maybe it's just my algorithms and who I'm following on LinkedIn, but I see a lot of founders now that are actually like being the face of their brand, like similar to what Jack has done. A lot of bootstrap companies and startups are like, all right, the founder is the person that's actually creating the content and being upfront, front and center on LinkedIn and everything. How have you seen that? Because that never used to happen. Like 10, 15 years ago, like those founders are behind the marketers, right?
yeah, it's true. I mean, well, I don't know actually. So I think founders have always been the faces of companies. We've just had a very different mechanism of exposure and distribution, right? Like instead of being on
Mm,
social, those founders were in the press. Um,
True.
like
True.
and in Entrepreneur and FT and blah blah blah, right? Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal and New York Times and all that.
Right. Right.
Um, they're still doing that today, but especially when it comes to consumer products and consumer tech, um, I think people are looking for deeper connections. Like people don't like the facelessness. I think a lot of like the old, like not old is the wrong word, the previous generation of founders, or even the previous two generations of founders, right, are like now kind of vilified a little bit because they don't have a relationship. The Bezoses and the Zuckerbergs, like, they are sort of up on a mountain and unattainable to their users, and so they're sort of vilified. As you look at recent events with Twitter notwithstanding, like Elon
Right.
Musk is someone who has always like seemed more accessible, always willing to talk to people and interact with them, and so he has a very hardcore and passionate audience. And whatever's happening with Twitter right now aside, that's worked for him.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. The more they're more approachable, I guess that's the word. Yeah, this has been fantastic. What is your I guess prediction, for lack of a better word? What's your prediction for the creator economy, in the next year or two? Like, do we just have more creators? Does it become easier to be a creator? Tools out there that make it easier. AI. Like, what's sort of your prediction? Where does this thing go? This massive thing that's building
Yeah, it's
out here.
it's interesting. I mean, so I think we will continue to see more people becoming creators.
Hmm.
I think we're going to see more creators coming into the business world, like
Mm.
more kind of almost B2B creators.
Yeah.
That might be a little bit of like, exposure bias on my part, given that I spend most of my time on LinkedIn.
Right.
But I think like, 150,000 people have been laid off in tech over the last 6 months, and a lot of those people are highly skilled, highly knowledgeable, and some of them are likely to become creators. Others are likely to start companies, and many that will serve creators. I
Mm.
think right now VCs are cold on the creator economy, but I don't think that means that the creator economy is stopping. If anything, the creator economy has been around far longer than VCs have paid it credit or paid attention to it.
Yep.
And so I think that there's a lot of companies that are in build mode right now, looking to serve creators, trying to figure out which creators they serve, what the right product is, all of that are rolling out products and improving products and reaching out to creators over the next year or two. And so I think the landscape is going to look very different. There's going to be a lot more companies serving a lot more creators. It's going to be much more fragmented. We'll see some consolidation as like, a lot of small, mid-sized creator economy companies start to run out of cash and get snapped up by the big platforms, or later stage companies like Patreon. But I think that there's going to be a lot more small fish entering the water looking to become sharks,
Yeah.
and so I'm excited. I think there's more opportunity than ever, both to be a creator and to serve creators.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I think it's gonna grow. I agree with you. I think we're just gonna. This whole thing is just gonna keep on growing. And I think what you said about like everybody's a creator. I think more of those people that are not monetized will start realizing, man, let's monetize. Why am I not monetizing? It's gonna make it
Yeah.
more sustainable, right? To be a creator and do what you love. Um, my final question for you is like, this is something I'm trying to ask now for a lot of the guests is what is one skill, like you know a lot of creators, you talk to a lot of creators, what's one skill you wish more creators had, like in this economy, if it helps, maybe as it pertains to business.
Mm. The first thing that came to mind was follow through.
Follow through. I love
Yeah.
that. Love that.
I think a lot of creators drop the ball or start something they don't finish,
So true.
um, or sort of have shiny ball syndrome,
Right.
or think they want something, and then when it appears to them, but they have to do work for it, they end up letting it go. And I get it; it's really hard to be a creator, and I'm learning that hands on myself right now, like trying to produce for LinkedIn and make this podcast, and also sign clients, and also actually service my clients, and it's tough. So I totally get it. But you know it's important. It's kind of this like free rider problem, right? In that the more creators do well by the companies that they work with, the more companies are going to spend more money and the more creators are going to make. But like every creator that drops the ball or doesn't deliver on a project for a company and gets some mid-level or junior marketing person in trouble, all of those things have compounding effects. They reduce budgets, they leave bad tastes in people's mouths, and so experienced people end up churning into other areas of marketing or partnerships, and new people come in who don't know what they're doing, and like all of these things I've heard so many times. Like, I'm so tired of working with talent. I'm so tired of doing this and that. And it's because of like that lack of follow through and that flakiness and wishy washiness. And I think that's changing as more and more people are becoming creators with intent, with like the intent to build a business as a creator, right? More and more people are, I like to say that, creators let sit on a spectrum between artist and entrepreneur. And like
Right.
an artist, like they care most about what they're making, about their art. They don't necessarily care about the business of it. They might allow business to fit their art, but
Right.
they're not going to really work to fit their art to their business. On the flip side, an entrepreneur who's a creator is, they create in order to build a business, in order to make money. They're going to tailor what they make to their needs of their business, right? And so, like on the, like Gary Vaynerchuk is the ultimate entrepreneur who happens to use content as a tool to drive his business.
Right.
And like on the other side, like I don't know, a painter, Takashi Murakami or whatever, like he is an artist and he's managed to fit the business to his art, right?
Right.
And so historically, especially in in the early days of the creator economy, like when I came up, uh, the vast majority of creators were artists who found fame, but they were always thought of it as like art, as being creatives, um, and and so I think that mindset led to a lot of the friction between businesses and creators, and a lot of drop balls, and a lot of like bad experiences all around. Now there's more and more people coming in with intent to build a business, intent to be entrepreneurs, and no one is, or very few people are in the extremes. Most people sit somewhere in the middle, either to one side or the other of the artist entrepreneur spectrum. But I think there's more and more coming in on the entrepreneur side, and hopefully, like that will lead to more follow through and fewer dropped balls and bad experiences.
I'm glad that you said that. I love that. Follow through. I see it myself. There's a lot of follow through being, dropped. So I love that. As we wrap up, Avi, thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for your time, sharing your wisdom and your experience. What's the best place to connect with you for the folks out there that are listening that maybe even want to consult with you? Maybe they have startups and companies that they want to work with creators on. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm on LinkedIn. That's my primary platform. It's you can search me Avi Gandhi, Avigandhi, and I am. Well, you can also reach me via my email, which is avi at partnerwithcreators.com. So
Fantastic.
those are, I think, the two best ways.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Avi. We'll talk soon.
All right, Rob. Thanks, man.